Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for spending your Wednesday evening with us. Thanks. So tonight, well, first, let me introduce myself. My name is Sally Boccella, and I'm running for Senate District 23, which is parts of Weld County, Larimer County, and all of Broomfield counties. So what prompted this for me was our talk. We always hear about a just transition, right? And I really want to make sure that the workers don't get left out of the conversation. So tonight, I have invited some guest panelists to be part of this, and they're going to basically talk to us through the lens of their members of what a just transition could possibly look like. So thank you all for being here tonight. Let me just add a couple more people in. So Rich, will you go ahead and introduce yourself first, since you have to go to another meeting at 6? I really appreciate you being here.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much. My name is, and just so everybody knows, I have a little stutter, sometimes I get hung up. So long story short, my name is Rich Meisinger. I'm the business manager of IBEW Local 111. And Local 111, we have about 4,250 members. Our members work for utility companies, REAs, outside construction, meaning power lines, right? I'm a journeyman lineman by trade. Our members work for Tri-State, for XL Energy, United Power, on and on. And so a just transition is important to us because our members work in the coal-fired power plants. And it's near and dear to me to ensure our members have a place to land and keep a roof over their head and food on the table for their families. So that's I don't know. I don't want to take a lot of time on the introductions. I would rather talk about a just transition. So I'll just leave it
Thank
there.
you so much, Rich. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jordan. Hi, Jordan.
Hey, everyone. My name is Jordan Jones. I'm a representative for the UBC Millwrights, Local 1607 here in Colorado. We represent about 500 members, 2,500 if you include the Carpenters, here in the state of Colorado. Just like Rich said, there's a lot of Excel plants, pretty much any power plant in the state of Colorado, a Millwrights in it, and with our Carpenters as well. A lot of coal-fired plants. We do a lot of scaffold work in there. So it's near and dear to us to keep these guys working, whether it's going from the coal to the natural gas or finding another solution that these members are able to put food on their table, like Rich said. That's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Gary.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Sally, for putting the panel together and everybody joining in to talk about an important topic. My name's Gary Arnold, and I'm the business manager of Pipefitters Local 208. We represent 1,800 pipefitters, welders, HVAC technicians across the northeast corner of the state, as well as 150 gas distribution members throughout the state of Colorado, installing the underground distribution infrastructure needed to feed homes and businesses with the natural gas that produces their heating and whether it be stoves and all the various uses of natural gas. I'm with Rich. I don't want to make a long-winded introduction. I look forward to a good topic and what a just transition truly is for not only our members and the members of the Carpenters and Millwrights and IBEW, but all workers in Colorado, to be frank, and a big portion of the middle class that has the ability to earn a living, provide for themselves, for their families, because of the job opportunities presented in the fossil fuel industries. So I appreciate you taking the time and look forward to a good discussion over the next hour.
Great. Thank you so much, Gary. Cindy. Hi, Cindy. Thanks. Welcome.
Hi, Sally. Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy Gallegos. I am the political liaison for Teamsters Local Union number 455. We represent about 10,000 members in Colorado, and a lot of our members are delivery drivers, truck drivers, and warehousemen. And we are very interested in this just transition because we all know automation is coming quick. And so we just need to make sure that all of our people, our members, have another job to go to if their job is taken away due to this automation. So thank you, Sally.
You're welcome. I'm still waiting. We have another guest panelist, Carl. He represents Smart Union, which is rail workers. And so once he's able to join us, I'll have him introduce himself as well. But let's get started on the discussion. So again, I was prompted to this because of, just some of the conversations I've been having. And, I am an environmentalist. I care about the environment. We do have climate crisis, but we do have to also acknowledge that fossil fuel industry has done a lot for our GDP here in Colorado. And, but it's a bust and boom industry, and we have to think about the future. So one of the things that's really important to me is that we don't forget about the workers. And so tonight, I just really want to talk about that. Like, how do we start these discussions where, we start thinking about bringing everybody to the table, and we start brainstorming about what is a just transition and how do we make that happen, right? Because what the last thing that any of us want is a ghost town, or people not being able to stay in their communities where they live right now, and they have to move somewhere else. And in some cases, they may not even be able to move because they can't sell their house, right? I've actually known people in those situations. So let's start the conversation. So Rich, you and I had that conversation about the bill that just passed, about a just transition. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So thank you for that. So in 2019, House Bill 1314 passed, and what House Bill 1314 did was create an office for just transition in Colorado. And so all throughout really the last part of 2019 and the first 6-7 months through 2020, we were meeting, although at the end there, we were meeting via Zoom and such, but we were meeting to talk about what a just transition is. And so it was broken up into 4 subcommittees. The first one was labor, right? Because it was myself and other unions that came up with just transition in Colorado, and it was myself and Carl Smith from the Smart Union, Gary Arnold from Local 208, and the Colorado AFL-CIO, and I know there were other unions on there as well that started meeting and talking about what a just transition is. So to kind of get back to where I was, there was labor, which is the impacted workers. There was the impacted communities. Most power plants in Colorado are in what we would call rural towns, right? Even Pueblo, even though it's getting very large, I think probably still falls under that umbrella. And then there was the finance, which it was the committee that was looking for different grants and different ways to fund it. And then there was a committee that was focused on low income communities also. And so everybody basically came up with what their plan was, right? So to kind of give some history, right? Like there's a power plant in Craig, Colorado, and there's a power plant in Colorado, which these two cities are 20 miles apart, and they are in northwestern Colorado, and those two power plants are basically the cornerstone of these of that area, right? Like there are coal mines there that fuel those plants, and so once those plants shut down, then the coal mines shut down, and it basically has this devastating impact, not on the workers, but not only just on the workers, but on the communities as well. As we were meeting and talking about a just transition, it was realized that just because something is good for the community doesn't necessarily make it good for the worker. And just because something is good for the worker doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for the community. So we had to break up into these groups and figure out what's best for each group. So it's a long story short, for an impacted worker, right? Like many of these people took these jobs 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and these are cradle to grave jobs, meaning they start at a young age. Their parents worked at the power plants, or their uncles did, or their families did. So they also went to work there, and many at a young age. And so after 30 years there, you're only 50 years old if you started when you're 20. But what is a 50-year-old person going to go out and learn and do? So one of the first things for a just transition for an impacted worker is a glide path to retirement. So in the plan we came up with was anybody within 5 years of retirement, which could be Social Security. In our case, we have contracts or collective bargaining agreements with the employers, right? And Hayden Power Plant is Excel, Craig Power Plant is Tri-State. So we actually, in those contracts, it speaks to retirement, right? So anybody who was 5 years away from whatever retirement plan they have is eligible for a glide path, which means they could retire and not worry about putting food on their table or losing anything. There's stuff in there about retraining, which is the TAA, and I forgot what that stands for, but basically it's a federal program that's in place where people's jobs are outsourced to other countries. There's this federal program in place that helps for retraining. So we basically copied what's in the TAA, which covers not only people, not only paying for people to go to school or their schooling, but they also get paid when they are going to school. And everything is basically based on how many years of service you had with each company, or how long you worked in the field, as well as moving assistance, right? So if people find other jobs, say in Denver Metro, and they're moving from Pueblo or Craig or Hayden, where housing is a lot cheaper than in Denver, we actually have housing allowance in there that would allow people to sell their homes in these rural areas and still be able to hopefully afford something comparable in Denver. And also, if people are actually going to school because there isn't any training or something available for them in their area or cities. If they travel outside, this also covers mileage, right? So you would be reimbursed at the federal rate for any mileage. So those are the things we are looking at, right? So basically, anybody who is losing their job because of the climate change legislation, and you are in any one of those sectors, you are then eligible for this. And so, of course, it's people in the power plant, people in the coal mines, people that haul coal, and on and on. So that's
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think it's really important that people know about this, right? That there is something that is put in place and that brought all the, all people, like the leaders of these different industries together. Because I know our state legislators and the state as a whole, we do care. We care about, our workers, and especially the middle class, right? Middle class is shrinking. We have to protect the middle class. So I'm very happy to hear that we have something in place. Like we've discussed, my concern is that our budget is already in crisis, and now with COVID, our next session is going to be even more dire. So you're looking at fiscal price tags on different bills. So I would really be happy to see something like this be still discussed and not put in the back burner too far, or killed for that matter, because we don't have the funding right now to implement those things. So I'm so excited that we have something that's already started, and now we can build on that. Jordan, you're a millwright. So tell me a little bit about what a millwright does and how, I was fascinated by this, and also too, like what does a just transition look like to a millwright?
So millwrights, when it comes to power plants, we're typically in there doing maintenance, building the plant, stuff like that. So we'll go in and out of different plants all across the state of Colorado, as well as any of the other 8 states we represent. So we're in and out all the time. Where it affects us is the members that live in the counties where the power plants are. Because like Rich had mentioned, you lose the main source of income in that town, then your housing is worth nothing. So for them to be stuck in those areas, that's what concerns us. But we've taken a different approach to it, and we've started actually implementing training to our members. We've gotten a hydroelectric wind turbine class going on at our International Training Center in Las Vegas. So we'll send our members out there to try and get them more apt to the renewable side, as well as our solar class. We have that. We send members out too to get them trained on how to install the solar panels in the fields. And we want to try and give the training to our members so they're not stuck. With the transferring over to gas fired, that's something we already do. We go in there, we service the coal, we service the gas, the hydroelectric. In areas we service turbines as well. So it's not as big as where are we going from here, but how do we sustain with others in those areas? How do we keep those communities alive for us? But we go all over the place. So the commute to work, you never know as a millwright. It could be an hour, it could be 5 minutes from the house. But it is important for us because we have members on this call here that actually live up in Weld County that this would affect for housing prices and everything else. So it's important that we find that just transition, and they know about all this stuff that's going on that Rich has mentioned. It's very important. And to see that, you, a representative of Colorado, care about the working class members is a big thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Gary. Hi, Gary.
Hello. Thank you, Sally. Like Jordan and Rich had described, the transition is a difficult challenge to figure out. Worker transitions are nothing new. They've happened in the past, whether it be, the transitions that you see in the markets from the horse and buggy to the automobile, or even when you look at fossil fuels, when fossil fuels really were emerging as an energy source, the amount of workers that had transition out of the whaling industry, because that was a main source of energy when they were prior to having readily available natural gas and coal and the different sources of energy that we have available in the fossil fuel industry. The real difference in this is those transitions were really forced by naturally occurring market conditions, which are not to say any easier to deal with or figure out how to meet those challenges. But this one is really surrounded by policy. It's not market conditions that are forcing the transition. It's policy decisions forcing a transition. And understand that elected officials and regulators have such a tremendous responsibility to address climate change that things need to be handled and addressed. But I would say that there's an equal responsibility on those same elected officials and regulators to address the economic fallout from the policy changes that force a transition away from fossil fuels. And so I think House Bill 1314, which I think Rich did a great job, Carl Smith with Smart Transportation Division, the AFL, all the stakeholders did a great job of really helping move that legislation forward with our officials, was a great first step. It formed the office in Colorado, it assembled the committees to do the important task of getting everybody around the table, doing a comprehensive study and data analysis to try to quantify exactly the challenge that we're facing. And so that leads us to the next very, very important step is what are we going to do with that report? What are we going to do with the data that committee and the office has been able to generate to really figure out how do we address the challenge of a just transition? And so it's all in up and down the supply chain, whether you're looking at coal from the mines to transportation to the power generation facilities that it's used at to produce the electricity we all need and use every day. If you're talking about oil and gas, that's upstream to well production to midstream operations and processing plants and pipelines, all the way down to refineries and end users, whether it be power generation or in-home heating and businesses and homes. And so it's just a much larger, complicated issue to try to figure out how do we make sure this happens in a just way. Our members, as well as the thousands and thousands of hardworking Coloradans throughout our state that depend on these jobs, have made the right decisions. They came out of high school or their communities, neighborhoods, and their skill set didn't lend itself to a traditional college education track. Their skill set and their knowledge lended itself greatly to our industries, and our training programs and apprenticeship programs gave them the ability to become master craftsmen in their industry without incurring huge amounts of student loan debt, and making them very strong contributing members to the middle class of Colorado. And where do they go from there? What do they do? To Rich's comment, what is somebody who's in their mid-50s that's spent their entire life, working life, dedicated to mastering a craft and an industry that is looking like it's going away? How do we make sure that those folks are taken care of, that they continue to have access to the middle class, which makes the entire state better? So training is a huge part of that. Training in fields that are related to what they've done, and so they can utilize those skills and the knowledge that they've spent years developing, continuing to provide for the community. This is even larger because of the amount of tax revenue and the tax base that's dependent on the fossil fuel industries. So whether it be special districts, our fire departments, and our schools, and especially for those smaller towns that really their entire local economy is focused in and around the fossil fuel industry, the power plant, or whatever it might be, what does that do to the housing market in those communities? We've seen towns devastated when a plant closes down without having some kind of industry stepping in to fill that void. And so money is a challenge. We know the challenges our state faces every year when it surrounds budget and funding for transportation, for education, and now how do we address this just transition? So we have to be creative. What I think a just transition in my eyes and the eyes of our members is they have an opportunity to continue to access that middle class lifestyle. And that's never going to be rich and owning mansions or any of those things. That's just being able to go to a job that you depend on, that provides you enough resources to put a roof over your head, to have food on the table, to be able to take your kids to the doctor when they're sick, to take care of your family, and all the things that we need to do. And at the end of the week, have something left over to go out and enjoy Colorado for what it is, to enjoy your time with your family. For our members, that would mean continue to have work opportunities and continue as a member of Local 208. So how do we work with some of the newer technology, the newer industries and the renewable sectors to make sure that those jobs are comparable and wages and health benefits and retirement benefits are comparable? A just transition isn't having a worker leaving a middle class family sustaining job to a job where they can no longer sustain that middle class opportunity.
Absolutely.
They can't have, $10, $12 an hour pay reductions and no longer have access to retirement. And so it's tough because, multiple organizations like the Millwrights and IBEW and the Pipefitters and all of us have worked for 100+ years fighting tooth and nail for workers to make sure that they had a fair shot and a fair access to the pie and to the economic prosperity that's generated with business. And a lot of that came with pensions that provide the most secure retirement benefits out there. But the entire model program works on continuing to have younger workers step in and continue to have contributions come in. So as our members get to retirement age, they get to retire with dignity and they can count on those monthly pension benefits. And when you talk about the elimination of an entire industry, how do we deal with that? How do we make sure that the retirees continue to have the promises that were made to them met? How do we guarantee that our current workforce has access to that good retirement benefits, and future workers have something to look forward to as they progress through their career? So it's a difficult, complex problem, and to Rich's point, there is no one size fits all.
Right.
You don't come up with solutions to fix community issues that are going to work for worker issues, and you don't come up with solutions to workers' challenges that address community challenges. And so it's going to take all of us coming together. And really, the next step here is having our elected officials, like yourself, Sally, as a candidate for state senate, to be creative and to be empathetic of the people that stand to be left behind while we address the important challenges that climate change presents itself. So I appreciate the time.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate you being here. You bring a lot of depth to this conversation, and we've had so many of them. I learned a lot from you. One of the things I also want to talk about in regards to this industry is, renewables, right? So Jordan, you mentioned, turbine, you mentioned like solar and wind, and Gary and I have talked about geothermal heating and cooling. Rich and I have talked about solar. How are these things, how do these fit in? And is this something that we can do an easy transition? Jordan, you want to take that?
Well, I'll just touch on that. Yeah, the thing with it is it's like Gary and Rich both said, these guys have been there for 20, 30 plus years. So you have a lifelong career that maybe their mother, their father, their uncle had all worked in this power plant.
Right, that's what I was thinking. Like this is a family legacy.
Yes, it's generations of of built up knowledge and work that's provided, the family farm for everyone. You know, I mean, it's renewables as a transition. For us, it's a one-time gig to do solar plants. You're in there and you might come back every now and again to do some replacements, but it's not 10 hours a day for a whole week through the rest of the year. It doesn't replace that worker's job and that opportunity for him to go to work. Turbines, you have a little bit more maintenance going into it when it comes to wind and everything like that. So it's still right there. You're not creating that 9-to-5 job that they were misplaced from. So that's one of the biggest things, that there is a positive for the renewable energy, but with those two alone, there's a bit of a negative to where you're not continually having that work for those members of the community.
Now,
Speaking
can geothermal energy do anything for your members? I know the Pipefitters could easily transition into that.
And we do have some geothermal when it comes to the steam turbines and everything like that. We go out there and we do it. Actually, one of the millwrights on here was just telling me about a story. He had gotten some poisoning from working at a geothermal plant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but he's alive and well today, so it's all good. But it's something we go into. Anything with the turbine, there's a millwright behind it. So for us, it's a little bit easier to transition into these different steps because we haven't gotten a way to get away from a turbine, whether it's hydro, wind, everything that requires a turbine requires a millwright to maintenance it, as well as all the other trades. So for us to transition, the biggest worry is the local members that it's going to be putting them out of the job when they're going there to a plant on a day-to-day basis. That's my biggest concern. And some of our members do that right now. So
we have to start thinking then of more innovative, either another innovative industry or more innovative work that is consistent as we move forward into the future. I mean, because this is what we're looking at, is the future. And so it has nothing to do with parties or anything. It's climate crisis, and it's the writing on the wall, and we all know that. And so, yeah, I think that's something that I was not aware of that, Jordan. So thank you. I think that that just puts something else where we need to seriously think about what are some things that we could transition into that's going to give us longevity. Because I mean, even fossil fuels isn't longevity if you think about it, right? I mean, I volunteer next to many furloughed oil and gas workers. God bless them. They're out there volunteering with me at the food banks, and they don't have a job right now. So yeah, I definitely, this is why we're having this, is so that we can think about these things together. And the people that are on here, I would love for you to also participate in this conversation. It's not just, the 5 of us talking tonight. I would love to hear your perspectives. I would love to hear about, like a personal story, maybe even some innovative ideas, right? I would love that. So please, there's a little raise your hand at the bottom. If you see, if you go to chat, you can either put a question in there. I think it's chat. Maybe it's not chat.
Hey, Sally, if you don't mind, Rich, he left for his union meeting tonight, but he did leave a comment here concerning the renewables. He said his issue with the renewable energy sector is they pay low wages, they're hard to organize. They also don't create many jobs as they utilize. And to his point, that's exactly spot on. If you go into solar fields, it's a battle to the bottom for wages, which is a hard thing to compete with when you have a package with benefits to all your members, and they'll want to come in and pay an operator $11 an hour to run a piece of equipment.
So how do we change that? Is it just being collective bargaining, or how do we change that?
I think collective bargaining is definitely a start. But I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
No, you were reading what Rich said. And so you were saying that with the renewables, they're not offering, good paying wages. And I think, yeah. And I think that that's, so I was just asking, like, how do we help that? Is it collective bargaining? Is it, are there unions for these kind of jobs, or no, not yet? I don't know. I mean, can your union represent your workers in this respect?
Yes, we do with the Carpenters and the Millwrights together. We go out and represent these people. A lot of the thing is they're hard to organize because they're pop up overnights. They'll come in, bring a bunch of people from out of state, which takes money out of our community, out of our areas that we're trying to bolster by bringing these $1 million solar plants in, just to have the money sent out to Kansas, Texas, the southern states. So it's a hard thing to get somebody to move here, staying at $11 an hour when your housing rates are very high.
Absolutely, yes.
So
Hi, Emmett.
Sally,
Emmett had a question.
Yes, I like that collective bargaining. I think Jordan hit it on the money. I'm in California, but I'm a millwright. I've been a millwright for 20 years, and I worked in Colorado, Arizona, all over the state. And what I found is that collecting a bargain agreement with a local hire, and if the language in that collective bargaining agreement, and also someone that's going through apprenticeship, so because if they're going through apprenticeship, they're getting trained. The apprenticeship is college credits, so it's giving them that education they need to be able to survive and be able to make a living wage and survive in this country. And so
it also makes you a master in that craft, is the way I understand it.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Gary.
So Sally, I appreciate you calling on me. I think we had just a couple clarifications that I wanted to throw out there. When we talk about geothermal, it can mean different things to different folks, right? So way we break out geothermal is really kind of three different categories. So when you're looking at geothermal for power generation, I think that does provide a good transition for multiple crafts, pretty much all the crafts, because all you're doing really is replacing a coal or gas-fired boiler with a geothermal earth-heated boiler. And so, you're going deep down into hot pockets, which there are some locations in Colorado that lend themselves well to geothermal power generation. And you're bringing up that heat and superheating water into superheated steam and turning turbines just like you do with a coal or gas-fired boiler. And so I think there's opportunities, even though they are limited by the geographics of Colorado and where you can find kind of those hot pockets underneath the Earth's surface. Then there's geothermal in a sense of in-home heating and cooling, or for homes and businesses. And that's really, strictly relying on, once again, running loops underneath the Earth's surface and being able to pick up, kind of heat from the ground and transfer it into the space for heating, or, running it into cooler spots in the ground and picking up, or dropping off heat out of the house to cool. And then you have what I think gets considered as geothermal, but really is more like ground source heat pumps, which is utilizing an underground loop to provide your heat transfer on a traditional air conditioner or heat pump that typically happens air, which works in certain climates. It's tougher in Colorado because of our low temperatures, and where ground source heat pumps actually lend themselves to the efficiency that can be utilized here in Colorado. And so once again, it's always a little bit more complicated because you have to be looking at exactly what part of geothermal. When you say that, it could mean a multitude of different things. And to Jordan Eric's point that we need to look at what can we do here. When you look at the traditional renewables sector, if it's rooftop solar and community solar gardens and some of these smaller kind of projects, there is significant wage and benefit deltas, extremely low wages and benefits compared to traditional fossil fuel industries. Now, when you move into utility scale, solar and wind, power generation facilities, those wages do start to come up. But to my knowledge, there isn't a single organized workforce in the renewable sector here in Colorado that has access to a collective bargaining agreement, which historically has shown over and over again the most effective tool to raise wage and benefits for workers and provide safer working conditions and provide training opportunities for those workers to flourish. Unfortunately, what we've seen some of the utilities do here in Colorado is utilize those projects to bring in out-of-state workforce. And so whether they're coming from Oklahoma and Texas, and I don't have anything against any of those folks.
But you know what, Gary, though, this is the same thing that happens with the film industry. I do have a problem with this. So
Well, my
you,
point was I don't have a problem with them. I have a problem with Colorado using resources to not reward Coloradans,
right.
and making a conscious decision to not employ Colorado residents.
Absolutely.
Not allow them to spend those paychecks right back into our local economy, to take that money right out of Colorado and send it back home. That's right. Where I think we all have an agreement.
So then these are the things that we need when we're collective bargaining or trying to organize in these different job opportunities. Those are the two things we need to make sure is on the table, right? It's the same thing that we deal with the film industry, right? When a film production company comes into a city or a town, to do business in that state, that's one of the first things is you have to employ our talent. It has to be a huge percentage, right? Because we need our people to be working. So I totally understand that.
Well, and that revolves around what we would call best value contracting. So the number one pillar in best value contracting is, are you utilizing local residents for your workforce? That's number one and always will be number one. And so we know, whether it be construction of projects or continuing operations, ratepayers need to be considered. The tax on citizens needs to be considered. So price is always going to factor into the decision, but you really need to be looking at, what is that overall value for Colorado? Are you putting Colorado workers to work? Are they getting paid industry standard wages? Do they have access to health care and retirement benefits? We know those things are much, much more expensive on the back end than on the front end. If we're investing and making good policy to entice good business that are treating those employees right and providing those things, it saves Colorado millions and millions and millions of dollars on the back end trying to figure out how to provide those for folks that just don't have access to them. And then the fourth pillar, once again, goes back to training. And to the point of multiple generations being engaged in the various industries, it's because an apprenticeship program in a skilled trade that gives you the training and knowledge you need to be a true master craftsperson in your industry, that's transformational for generations. It doesn't just lift one person out of the middle class. Almost all the time it becomes this generational transformation where you have the ability to continue to bring folks up into that middle class. We know how expensive housing here in Colorado is. We know, with our growth and the economic boom that we've enjoyed, or at least some folks have enjoyed, it's made it very tough on others to continue to exist in that middle class realm. And so these are the things that we need to consider when we're drafting policy that addresses any of these transitions. What are we doing to Coloradans and folks here, and how can we make sure that that's a true just transition, and those folks have an equitable access to what we would consider as the American dream, and that's just simply existing in the middle class.
I agree with you completely. It is the American dream, absolutely. And I think that is one of the things too. We want to lift up, right? We want to get out of generational poverty, and I do see that in the different legacies. I mean, your own, right, Gary? Your own legacy, your own family legacy. So I definitely understand that. And like I said in the beginning of this, event was, it's important that we don't leave the middle class behind. Middle class makes up majority of Americans, and Colorado, right? So we definitely don't want you to be priced out of your homes. We don't want you to lose, your work, your jobs, your health care. So yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate you definitely giving us that perspective too, that a lot of us who don't work in this industry, we don't know. So I do appreciate that. Holly. Hi, Holly. Holly Hearson. Holly is running for House District 48 in Will County. And she has something, she has a, hi, thanks so much for joining us. She had a question.
So it's more of sort of an answer to the how do we determine whether or not we can raise wages up for these particular industries where they are abysmally low, and particularly in
Holly,
contrast to oil.
Holly, your audio is like it's cracking. It's hard to understand what you're saying. So you were saying.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You were saying, how do we raise wages is what I heard.
Right, yeah. And in my, in what I think is going to be a necessary step is giving subsidies to renewables rather than oil and gas. And that's something that we're just going to have to, as members of the legislature, really focus on and not back down, to move those subsidies from the oil and gas industry to the renewable industries that are, particularly impacting these union jobs. So,
do any of the panelists want to speak to that about subsidizing the industries like the renewables?
Yeah, I would. I understand the thought process and, how subsidies can be utilized as a useful tool to make sure that we're bringing up the renewable sector. The concern I think that you probably would hear the most from the workforce is, how do we ensure that those subsidies are utilized to raise wages and benefits for the workforce and not utilized to increase profit margins and different things like that. And so, once again, this is a transition that really has been forced not through market conditions, but more for policy standpoint. And so, labor protections that go along with those subsidies go a long ways. And so, when those companies access those subsidies, they have to, sign off and agree to labor neutrality agreements. They have to sign off and agree to be a neutral on card check. And that doesn't mean that those workers are forced to join a union. I think we all are very proud of our organizations because of the value we bring to our members, not for trying to force anybody to be part of our organizations. But that means that those companies can't launch anti-union campaigns, which are very effective. They have a captured closed-door audience, where when we go out and have our conversations, it's after hours, it's at spaces that we rent and have to provide in neutral locations, and so the cards are stacked significantly against us when it comes to those organizing efforts, and balancing the subsidies with labor neutrality clauses and labor guarantees is a way to really make them effective tools. I think if we do that without including kind of some of those other mechanisms, then maybe we don't necessarily address the root cause of where the worker wage and benefit differential exists.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Holly, for that too. We have another question from Stephen.
Hi.
Hi,
Sorry,
welcome. Thanks for being here.
So my name is Stephen Arnold. I'm a second generation Millwright. I'm the apprenticeship instructor for the Millwright program in Colorado. And talking about renewables and different types of energies, something that in my career I've done a lot of work in is the nuclear industry. And I know it gets a bad rap, but when you look at carbon emissions and stuff and sustainable long-term power generation, a very viable option. I know it's definitely a long-term goal. It's not something that all of a sudden tomorrow you decide, hey, we're going to build a nuclear plant. There's a lot of hurdles, stuff like that. But both on the construction side of it, that's a lot of trade work, but also on the maintenance side of it, that's a very good transition for power plant workers. That is long-term, because you can't run a nuclear plant without maintenance, without operation staff on site. And nowadays the old mentality with nuclear was these massive power plants that were a big footprint, took up a lot of energy. But if you look at some of the other countries like Canada, France, they've gotten to a lot more modular nuclear that that is smaller and is not near as big of a footprint, doesn't produce near as much waste. So it's definitely a lot of the other countries, that's the way they've been going as far as like Canada, France, Britain, to help with the get away from fossil fuels.
And is you pronounce your name Stefan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry, I pronounced your name wrong. That's a great addition to this conversation, actually. I was actually talking to Representative Tone about this, and she said, because I'm from the East Coast, and so nuclear, you know, takes a lot of water. So I was thinking, that's not even an option for us here in Colorado. But she said that here in Utah, as you were saying, like there's a compact, that they are making things so that it's not massive, right? And they're able to do it, and they're able to use less water. And so they're successful in Utah. And so it's something that we should look into, I think.
And as far as the water is concerned too, if you look at the largest nuclear generating facility in the United States is 50 miles west of Phoenix in the middle of the desert. And they actually have a site, the Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station. They have an on-site water treatment plant. So the city of Phoenix actually pumps their sewage to the nuclear plant. They process it to a point where they could use it for cooling water. And that's how they get some of their cooling water too.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know what? I would love to have your email, and I would love to discuss this more, because that's something that I think we should look into and have, you know, more conversations on that. And I know Representative Tone is very interested in having these conversations too. And she's already an elected official. So it's nice to know that she's thinking about these things too. So Zcat was saying, he has a comment here, a lot of folks don't understand what new nuclear tech looks like and how it works and how efficient it is now by comparison. That's an excellent use of sewage. Actually, I had never considered using it that way as an option. Is that something that you're familiar with too, Stefan?
Yeah, well, the sewage part is the water treatment, new nuclear technology.
Oh, right, the water, yeah. Right. Thanks, Zeke.
New nuclear technology, like I said, it's getting a lot more. And they are building a couple of new plants like Vogel down in Georgia, and I think TVA has one going in Tennessee as new nuclear tech power plants going in right now.
So now the next question is going to be is funding.
Yeah.
That's the next question, right? That's the question I always get. So I always anticipate that, funding. And Gary, is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Stefan made a great point. And the new packaged nukes have moved away from the traditional reactors to thoriated reactors, which creates, you know, tremendously less waste. They're very efficient. You're always going to have to consider price for the power generation, whatever it is, right? And so they typically are going to look at kilowatt per hour cost to build and construct the various forms of power generation. The big advantage nuclear has is we still have not solved the problem of storage or how to provide baseline generation. And so, you know, our grid functions in a way that you have to match power generation with the demand on the grid. And so you have this base load that's consistently there that folks are drawing off of. And then you have your peak times where they're drawing more power, and more power generation has to be produced and put onto the grid so that it matches the demand. If you don't have enough, obviously you have rolling brownouts and blackouts and things of that nature, but you also have tremendous problems if you put too much on. So in traditional renewables like wind and PV solar, it is what it is, right? It makes power when the wind's blowing, and it makes power when the sun's shining, and it puts that somewhere, right? And so if you're generating more power than's being consumed, the problems that happen is you start popping transformers and you start bringing the grid down that way, and then you have outages with the same issues if you're not putting enough. And so, you know, battery technology is advancing, but it's still not there to really provide that base load or that storage that's needed, where nuclear plants solve that problem. They have a nice, consistent power output. You can count on them at all times. And so, you know, as that technology progresses, I think your cost per kilowatt per hour comes down. You don't have the water requirement needed for the larger plants, and you have a much more efficient, much cleaner thoriated reactor that they're operating on. And so it's a viable solution, you know, as we continue kind of down this road to solving the problems. One thing we know is we need the power generation because electricity is needed for every industry in Colorado, every ancillary business, everything that exists can't exist without, you know, a consistent, reliable source of electrical energy. And so I would agree wholeheartedly with the brothers there over at the Millwrights that it just needs to be something that's considered and looked at hard, and consider that entire value chain, right? You can't look at just the kilowatt per hour cost. Well, what does it cost to make sure that we have that reliable source of energy available to the residents of Colorado?
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. Stefan, did you have your hand raised again, or was that from before?
No, I was actually unraising it, at least I think I did. So yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Jordan, do you want to speak to any of that or add to that, or?
I mean, I agree with what both of them say. It's a big thing, but like you're saying, it's the funding.
Yeah.
Where are we funding? What's going to happen with it? Are we able to use some of these plants that are going to be decommissioned? Some of the land on there.
Right.
That's the other long-term topic to be
And
discussed.
I think these are conversations we could be having too with our federal officials, right? Because when we think about an economic recovery plan, we can use those federal dollars and put that into something like this, right? Something new that could employ so many people in different industries, right, across the board, which I think is fantastic. And, you know, we can measure the success of that with at least doing one thing. Gary and I have talked about stuff like that where, you know, we just need to just be able to have at least one that we can measure, right? Because you can't say no if you don't really know if it's going to fail or not. And when you think about funding, you know, obviously our state's in a budget crisis right now. So, but we do need to think about that, about how do we reinvest in our economy, reinvest in our workers. And I think that's when we start talking to our federal officials and saying, hey, this is where we need some help, right? And who knows, like then, you know, it can trickle down to other states and other, you know, other workers that are dealing with the same situations that we are. We're not alone in this. Colorado is not alone. There's other states dealing with this too, or have already been devastated, and we don't want to go there. So yeah. So Cindy, tell us a little bit about automation and how that's affecting the Teamsters, and what's a just transition look like?
Well, with the Teamsters, we represent a lot of delivery drivers and warehousemen, and that is one of the top 3 sectors in the country for employed people. So when you talk about automation with the automated vehicle, as a truck driving down I-25, you know, an Anheuser-Busch truck doing that with no driver in the seat, it's scary. It's scary to think of all the jobs that are going to be lost. And the same thing with our warehouses. The automation in the equipment is coming. We know it's coming and we don't want to fight it. But I think what we need to do is we need to make sure that these jobs aren't lost because of automation, but they enhance the worker's position. So maybe it saves them from injuries because they're lifting such heavy packages or something of that sort. As far as the just transition, we've been lucky because it really hasn't affected us yet. But listening to Gary and all the other guys, I think, you know, it's great to have them already looking into this because it's going to be here in the next 5 to 10 years for us. Might be sooner. So, yeah, so we need to start preparing. We need to start preparing our warehouse workers and our drivers and letting them know what's coming. And how hopefully we can do something where if legislation is introduced on autonomous vehicles being on our roads, then we need to have some kind of legislation that says, okay, if we're going to allow these cars and trucks on our roads, how are we going to employ these people and what is the just transition? So I think we almost need to include that in the bill as they're being written, that we need to address these problems beforehand. We don't want to be always falling behind and trying to fix the problem later. We want to be proactive on it.
See, the way I look at that is before the bill even gets introduced, we should be having these conversations, right? And we should be bringing
Yeah.
everybody to the table so that we can talk about these things together and address things that before it happens, right? Because like you said, you know it's coming. Now, whether it stays with us is another story, right? Because again, measuring success and failures. But I love how you did put in there about, you know, enhancing how we can make this new tech enhance the work of the person who's already doing it, right? And not phase them out necessarily, but just make things more easier. Because I think that's when you think about tech, you think of it being, it's convenient, right? It's efficient. So I love that you said that. I think that we should be thinking about how to work together, right? Not taking somebody out of the equation, not taking the human element out. But how do we enhance that and work together and make it so that it's something amazing, right? And,
and you know, with these delivery drivers that are gonna, you know, are truck drivers who could be out of jobs, the just transition, maybe they be the ones that are operating the equipment at the yards, or they're picking up the loads when they come off the highway and getting them to the warehouses. There's a lot of stuff we can look at that we really just need to start preparing for. So
I agree.
I'm really glad that you invited us to this call, because it's coming and we see it already hitting other sectors. And so we need to be prepared when it comes to ours.
I appreciate your input. And like I said, we're looking at these through the lenses of your members, right? Because, you know, I can't even begin to know, right, about pipe fitters, millwrights, you know, electricians, the truck drivers, I don't know. And that's why we look to you to guide us, you know, and to help us as we move to the future, right? Because we definitely want to make sure that everybody is thriving along with innovation, right? So, so is there anything, I mean, when we were talking, you know, is there anything that you guys have been thinking about that would help, that we, you know, like I always like, when I have these conversations, whether it sticks or not, we should just be like throwing stuff at the wall, right? And seeing like, what can we come up with? And then somebody else can pick up on that possibly and maybe expand on it, that maybe it's something that you and I didn't think of already. So is there something that you guys have been thinking about that may enhance, you know, the transition for your members? Because like you said, you know it's coming. So
I think we're going to have to start a couple committees. I think we're going to have a warehouse committee, and I think we're going to have a truck driver committee, and invite these members to come in and help with this language. Because, you know, with me being in the office, I know what they're going through, but I'm not the one out there driving that truck. So I think we need to start preparing that way, where we're having these committees, we're bringing people in, we're talking to them, and they're helping us with future legislation that can affect their work. So I think that's where we need to start. And then hopefully, again, make sure that any bills that are introduced, that they already have the language in to address these issues. And I think the last thing is make sure we're electing officials who care about the working people. Because really, if we don't have officials in there that care, they're not going to care about these people when they lose their jobs.
Thank you, Cindy. And like I said, absolutely. We do need our elected officials to care about our workers. I mean, they are the pulse of our economy. So John, hi, did you have a question? Thank you, Cindy, so much.
Thanks, Sally.
Hi, John. You have to unmute yourself. Unmute. There you go. Oh, no.
Sally, I think he might have typed in the chat that he doesn't have a mic.
Oh, I just see that now. Thank you, Gary. Okay, let's see. I've always felt that if tech comes in to take over a worker's job, that worker should have the choice to learn how to maintain and keep the tech up to par. Absolutely. If this requires education, we need to make the education cheap or free for that worker. Yes. And that's what I love too about a lot of your unions, because you're already thinking about stuff like that. You're already thinking about training and apprenticeship, and so I do think that that's important, and I do think it's important to include those workers in these conversations, right? Because they know best their industry and their job. So thank you, John.
Well, I agree with that tremendously, Sally. I think, sometimes we envision education as, our K through 12 public education or higher education as a separate entity that industry, can expect somebody to go through that education program and come out the end and deliver right to their front steps, a skilled trained worker for them to use for the rest of their career. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. The truth is industry, workers, education need to come together and work on this together, because we all have a stake in it. And so that's where I think we find efficiencies. We find out exactly from industry what trainings the workers needed and what's utilized and what maybe they don't need to worry about, right? And so how do we bring everybody to the table and then start throwing those things at the wall? It's tough. I wish I had more answers than questions, but unfortunately that's never the case for me. I always have more questions than answers, but I think there's a lot of smart people. And what we'll find is you have just a really great group of people in Colorado. I truly believe that from the bottom of my heart, that we have residents that are smart, that are creative, and we just need to figure out a way to really bring those voices to the table. I think that elected officials do a great job. It's tough. You're expected to be an expert on everything that comes in front of you, which is unrealistic.
It is.
And why everybody at the table is so important. Like you said, we need the opportunity to share real life stories and experiences. And what we've seen, or what I would say, really one of the main importance of having unions and labor organizations like everybody that's on the call tonight is, we are that worker voice. If you go down to the Capitol any given day, you're going to have all kinds of lobbyists. You're going to have all kinds of business associations down there talking to elected officials and advising you on the challenges that they face. And I'm not saying that they don't have challenges, because they do, and they should be down there. But the average worker, they're working. They can't go down there. And so, we really appreciate our members trusting in us at Local 208 with our business agents and myself as the manager, trusting that we're going to be that voice down there for them and sharing those real life experiences. But outreach into the members and getting them more involved in the conversation, I think, can do nothing but provide additional solutions to our challenges.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gary. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Sally, for starters, thank you for talking me all the way home tonight. I finally made it home. I'm sitting on the deck and enjoying a nice, fall evening. Just fired up the grill. Hey, I'm not one of those smart guys that Gary was just talking about. I would probably rank very low on the list of just from the people that are on this call. I do know this is not this is not the first time we've gone through this. A change in how power is generated. We continue to adjust and go with the flow. I mean, our millwrights. They came from the carpenter craft. That was the old water wheel that used to power the sawmill in town. And, that was power generation, and it was a piece of equipment that moved, it rotated, and the more precision it was built, the longer it would last and the smoother it would run. And, hey, as the needs for power generation got more and more, technology improved and advanced and, became more precision. That's where our millwrights came from. at least in our craft. So hey, changes in power generation is not new. But as discussed, the renewables, we know they're not constant. And so absolutely the discussion tonight regarding nuke plants and the advanced technology there, that is constant energy as compared to wind, not constant, solar, not constant, hydro during a drought season, hey, we got an issue. But what's important is that we're discussing, how we address the people that are in those industries. How do they, remain assets to their communities and to the state of Colorado rather than burdens to their communities and to the state of Colorado. And, local governments, state government, federal government absolutely, has, some say in how these plants get built, how this stuff gets done. I mean, I'll speak to personal experience when, Comanche 3 down in Pueblo, was starting up, and, hey, who's going to build that? How is it going to get built? Is that going to be living wages? Are those, jobs of building that plant going to provide family benefits? It was local government, I mean, as small as city council, that really had the biggest impact in making sure that a project labor agreement was put in place for the building of that plant. So as Gary Arnold spoke to, best value contracting, that's absolutely part of it. Project labor agreements, community workforce agreements, local hire language in any kind of agreement. Communities, governments, elected officials can absolutely require, a power generation company to agree to some of that type of language in building a plant. So yeah, it's kind of, hey, how are we going to transition those people that are currently in that industry? Hey, we've adjusted for hundreds of years, and we're not done. I mean, while we're concerned about renewables and green energy, at the same time, every day we increase our demands for power. We're going to electric cars. My Harley is not electric and probably never will be, but they are building electric Harleys for European countries. So the demand isn't getting any smaller. Power is not going away; it's going to change. And so, how do we make sure that the power generation industry continues to provide good wages, living wages, family benefits, and several have talked about what a collective bargaining agreement can provide, and several have said hey, you're never going to live in a mansion, you're never going to get rich, and for some of us, hey, that's not my aspiration, to be rich. I want to live with dignity. I want to provide for my family. I want to drive a truck that is reliable, and I don't have to have the hood up on that truck every weekend just so I can make it to work for another week. Hey, these discussions I appreciate and encourage more of. Everybody who's in on it tonight, and hey, it's a lot of unions that are on the conversation tonight. Hey, we know the issues. We talk about them with ourselves and each other all the time. We need to get out into our communities and express these same concerns. So, Sally, thank you for facilitating tonight. Thank you for including us. Thank you for all who have engaged in the conversation.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm going to I just wrote this down. Power is changing. So we have to change with it. It's nothing new.
Absolutely.
We're always going to need power. So I love that. Yeah, I think that, you really broke it down. in layman's terms on how do we do a just transition, right? No matter what we decide, is making sure that we have these important elements in the language, right? And I think that the only way that someone who's not in your industries and in your labor unions, who understands the verbiage and the terminology that needs to be used, I really appreciate that. I appreciate you guiding me on that, and guiding us as a community, right? Because I do think it's important to include that. And I think that you're right. That is the way we actually have a just transition, is making sure that we have all of these key elements in place. And then whatever else we decide to do, whether it's nuclear or whatever, we have protections, right? We can take care of our workers. You know, Carl's not here because he had to deal with an emergency issue. Carl was our Smart Union panelist, and we had a great conversation. And it's unfortunate he wasn't able to be part of this tonight, but he represents railroad workers and conductors, and those conductors rely on coal plants, right? Unfortunately. So, but they make a great living, just like we talked about, right? These families, this is their legacy. This is what they have been trained to do. They make a great living. They have great healthcare benefits. And he told me a story about a woman who is a conductor, and she has a special needs child, and she is able to provide for, and she's a single parent, and she's able to provide for her family and healthcare because of this job. And so, of course, what is her concern? Her concern is what happens when they close that coal plant, right? And we all know that that's going to happen because of the environment, right? It's inevitable. But I said to Carl, I'm like, but we have to start thinking of things now. And he absolutely agrees, right? And everybody here agrees. That's why we're having these conversations, is to bring everybody to the table now, not when it's too late and this woman is out of work, and people like her and people like all of you who are out of work. And what do? You lose, you can't sell your house because the town is devastated and nobody wants to move there. You're stuck there. You don't have work. You don't have, and unfortunately, if you don't have work, you don't have health care. So it's just this domino effect. And what is the answer? Even the other thing that he was saying was, and this is to Cindy's point, is they're also concerned not only with, shutting down the coal plant, but automation. Because automation, if climate crisis doesn't put you out of work, automation is going to put you out of work, right? Possibly. And so these are the things that we need to start thinking about. Is how do we work with the innovative technology together, right? I think we had a question. Oh, Jody, did you want to say something? Thank you so much for your comment. I appreciate you being on this. Jody.
No, Sally, I appreciate just the opportunity to be here and listen, and just grateful for everything that all these workers and unions do for working families, and just grateful that they're all here. And I'm really thankful for their words and their thoughts. It's been really moving, and I'm writing, taking lots of notes and thinking a lot about this. So thanks for letting me say a quick moment. So.
Oh, absolutely. Jody is running for Larimer County Commissioner. And so I'm taking a lot of notes too, Jody. And I hope others are taking notes at home. So is there any other final comments that anybody wants to add to this conversation? I mean, obviously this is just one of many. We're not going to stop having these conversations, I promise you. At least I'm not, because we don't have answers yet, right? So is there anybody else here that would like to just say something before we end this?
I would just like to reiterate what everyone's thinking is thank you for putting this together. Being able to discuss these topics with all these other union leaders and the people that it affects, it's definitely enlightening and inspiring. And just
thank you, Jordan. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm so happy and honored that you all participated, because I can only support your efforts and support our economy and support Colorado by having you in the conversation. by including you. So let's do this again. And please, please do not hesitate to reach out to me after this is over, because I'm sure things will come up and I will have questions, and I know I can come to you, and I appreciate that so much. And I would also like to invite Holly and Jody, who are also running for office. They're also interested in helping workers out, and also with a just transition. So I'm sure that they would love to be able to reach out to you as well. Hi, Mark. Have to unmute.
Just, my chat was just thank you to all engaged in the conversation. As we're winding down, I didn't want to miss that opportunity.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. Let's see if there's anything in the chat. Oh, great. Thank you, Stefan. Yeah, if there's anyone else on here that would like to contact me, please leave your email in the chat. I would really appreciate that. And also, if you're able to contribute to my campaign, as you know, it takes funding to reach voters and win campaigns. So if you're able to, please go to my website, or please click on to the link there that Becky has provided. I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate all of your support and your endorsements. I can't even begin to tell you how humbling and honored I am by that. So thank you. We will get this done, and I look forward to representing you at the Capitol. So thank you so much for all of your hard work and everything you do for us in Colorado. And let's do this again. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Mark, Jordan,
Thanks
Rich.
so much.
Yes, thanks everyone. Good night.
Sally.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Good night.